Necrophagist was a German technical death metal band, officially active from 1992 through to 2010. In that short amount of time, with only 2 studio albums, they managed to shape a subgenre, a sound of metal that's now more prevalent than ever. But there's more to Necrophagist than meets the eye. The band was founded and fronted by one Muhammed Suiçmez, a man of so many mysteries that this video will probably end up being 40 minutes long. Necrophagist's 1999 debut album Onset of Putrefaction was a not-so-instant death metal classic. It sounded pretty horrible initially, given the fact that at that point Necrophagist was pretty much Muhammed and a drum machine. But after its 2004 Willow Tip Records re-release featuring brand new drum samples and a way better mix, it laid the groundwork for what tech death was to become. Also in 2004, Necrophagist released their even more iconic second and officially last studio album Epitaph, only this time there was an actual band. The Epitaph lineup was as follows: Muhammed Suiçmez as always on guitar and vocals, Christian Münzner on lead guitar, Stefan Fimmers on bass, and Hannes Grossman on drums. In the years after Epitaph's release, fans yearned for new Necrophagist music, and starting in 2008, the band was making some pretty big promises. For instance, here's a clip of a 2008 Metal Injection interview with Muhammed Suiçmez.
When is the new album coming out?
Yeah, we're planning on making Summer Slaughter 2009 the release tour of the new album. So that's the big plan, and we hope we can fulfill that plan. And I think we're going to be able to do that, so...
By all accounts, there were even 2 potential working titles floating around for that new record, as well as the gear that was going to be used to record it. Fast forward 4 years to 2012, the ex-drummer of Necrophagist, Marco Miniman, was still confident that there would be new material eventually, but had no details or any idea as to when. And finally, in 2016, Necrophagist issued a statement saying they were pretty much done as a band. While that 2008 Metal Injection interview was one of, if not the last, official interview featuring Muhammed, he has been spotted in public by fans occasionally, like this guy who spotted him at Brutal Assault Festival in Czechia in 2019. In fact, in the caption of that Instagram post, the guy who ran into him says that he asked him about that potential third record, and Muhammad's answer was that he had it finished on a hard drive somewhere in his house, he just had no motivation to do the band again right now. And motivation, or lack thereof, to keep Necrophagist alive seems to be a common theme across past members of the band, just judging by the insane turnover in members that band saw in the few years it was actually active. One of few things that are actually common knowledge about Muhammed Suiçmez is that earlier on in his life he studied engineering, and so it's now been rumored for many years that he works as an engineer at BMW in Munich, Germany. Nobody who I would officially consider a reliable source on Muhammad's life has ever actually confirmed this, but it's been said so many times, and Reddit claims it was actually written in Muhammad's Wikipedia entry back when that was still up, that I'm inclined to believe it. Now, I live a solid 6-hour drive away from BMW in Munich, and so I think it's only rational that I make the drive out there for the remainder of this documentary. But first, there's a bunch more ground to cover as far as the history of Necrophagist goes. But if I were to tell you all of these things myself, then it would be nothing but speculation and hearsay on my part, and that's not really enough for a documentary. I need somebody who doesn't have to speculate. Someone with first-hand experience. So I'm currently here with Christian. Now, if you're a fan of Necrophagist, then you may know Christian as one of 2 guitarists on Epitaph, and I'm just going to ask him a few questions because this is great material for a documentary on Necrophagist, obviously. Fans will know this, but just how long were you in Necrophagist for?
I think in total I was in the band for a time of around 4 years. I joined the band in May 2002. Well, we recorded Epitaph in the summer of 2003. It was released in 2004. And then I did a couple of European shows with them in 2005 and one European tour in 2006. It was a European tour with Bolt Thrower and Malevolent Creation and Night Rage. And after the tour, I quit the band, basically.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, Epitaph is one of 2 records, but it's it's one of the most famed tech death records. It shaped the sound of the genre. I've heard a few stories from people who weren't actually involved about how the process of recording that album must have been, but since I have you here now to give me some first-hand stories, just what was the process like of recording Epitaph?
When I joined the band in 2002, in May of 2002, because I was a huge fan of the first record, that was just around the time when Muhammad had started writing material for Epitaph. So he had a couple of songs written already. I think it was, I don't remember completely, I think it was a title track and the Stillborn one, I think also Step Wound, and he had back then he had written those songs in power tab format, because it was actually before Guitar Pro was a thing, because I think Guitar Pro came out around 2003. And then I remember the first thing, so we were talking about doing this new record. We didn't really have a lineup. We still needed to find a drummer and a bass player, because our original drummer, Daniel, he wasn't really into it so much anymore, and we didn't have a bass player. A friend of mine from my hometown played bass on a couple of local shows that we did before, or some shows in Czech Republic, but he wasn't going to do the album. And then Muhammed said, oh, there's this new program, Guitar Pro, and they're having a drum editor, right? So now I can program the drums, or write the drums exactly how I want them. So you get songs completely written with guitars, drums, and bass. The only thing that wasn't composed was the solos. And so we were looking for lineup. I remember my friend Hannes, whom I met a couple of years earlier, and I thought he might be fit for the job, right? So we auditioned Hannes, and then Hannes knew Stefan Fimas, a friend of his, and he said, yeah, I think this guy could do the bass, right? And then we started recording the album, and it was we didn't really get a huge recording advance back in the day, because obviously no one was going to expect that the band would become so big, right, like it did later on, right? Because Onset of Purification was a very underground record. What actually happened was we bought recording equipment to record the guitar. So back then we bought AD converters and the software and stuff, and we recorded the guitars in the basement of an old school in Baden-Baden. That was I think it was the school that Muhammad went to, and there was an old basement.
That's what I've heard. It's great to hear that confirmed. Actually,
that's actually true. So we and Muhammad, and together with Mario, who was the old guitar player of Necrophagist, who played a couple of gigs with them, but on no recording. He played a while before I was in the band. They constructed the room, so they put all the dampening in there, and then we recorded with a real amplifier, Angle Tube Record 860. I don't remember what kind of cabinet it was. If it was an Angle cabinet or a Marshall cabinet, but what I remember was it was actually microphoned. Okay. And there was a little control room that we built next to it. It was a super small room, and it was quite horrible actually, because the room was super small. It was very humid, and when it was raining and cold outside, it got cold in the room, and it got wet in the room, which was the control room. And we had a little couch in there, and a chair, and a little desk where we had the computer set up. And it took us a couple of days. Muhammed was spending a couple of days just dialing in the tone, and then experimenting with different microphone positions and things like that. And I remember, we had dialed in the tone. We were about to start recording, and we got some coffee. And Muhammed was like, my sister is going to visit with her little daughter just for a few minutes, and then we can start recording, So his sister came with her daughter, and the daughter saw the amp, because the amp was in the control room. He's like, "Oh, what is that?" And started turning the knobs.
Oh God!
And then we had to redo some of the dialing in.
Oh God!
that was actually quite funny. Yeah. So that's where we recorded the guitars, and we recorded actually guitars and drums simultaneously. So Hannes came to the place, and he recorded in Studio Iguana with Christoph Brandes. So they were recording the drums, and we started recording the guitars. Whenever they had a drum track finished, Christoph would send it our way so we could start recording the guitars on it. Stefan Fimas recorded the bass in his home studio, because he had his own studio, but he recorded a little bit later than we did. He recorded after all the guitars and drums. For the majority of the songs, we did it really like the old school. Everyone played his own side of the guitars, right? So one side of the rhythm guitars is Muhammad, one side of the rhythm guitars is me. That was for 5 out of the 8 songs, but the recording process was very, very long. We took so much time with recording the guitars, and then I started university in that same year, so I couldn't really stay there anymore in the studio. So there was 3 songs where Muhammad did all the rhythm guitars, and ironically, one of the songs where he played all the rhythm guitars is the only song that I co-wrote, like the song Symbiotic in Theory. It's the one song where I wrote a couple of the riffs, but this is one of the 3 songs in which I don't play any rhythm guitar.
That was going to be one of my next questions. Is what was the writing like? Was it all Muhammed?
For the most part, it was all Muhammed. So he had all the 7 songs written, the first 7, except for Symbiotic in Theory. And the one thing, of course, I wrote my solos. He had some input where I overplayed, or he had some things that he would say, I change this and do it more like that. But I wrote my solos. And I actually wrote some of the bass lines. So sometimes he sent me some songs in Guitar Pro, like for example in Step Wound or still ones, like maybe we have an idea for the bass lines, right? And sometimes he had ideas, and I added some things. But some of the bass lines that you hear were actually co-written by Muhammed and me, actually, because so that's why because I was a lot into the Craig House stuff back then, and you hear how in Step Wound, for example, there's like some of these Craig House style tapping arpeggios, but on the bass. So these ideas were some of my ideas, or some of the tapping bass ideas that you hear. So I wrote actually some of the bass lines, but all the rhythm guitars and drums were completely composed by Muhammed.
Okay.
And like I said, solos were not composed. We did them in the studio, right? We started coming up with ideas as we were recording them.
I'm a very regular person, and I can therefore be trusted to give financial advice on what to spend your money on. And so today I'm here to talk about something to spend your money on, which is today's sponsor, Justin Hombach, and his online guitar course, The Zen of Speed Picking. Now I'm pretty sure I just heard the majority of you let out a heavy sigh at the thought of yet another online guitar course. What is this douchebag able to offer you that a million others haven't already? Well, for one, he has a way better mustache than any online guitar instructor I've ever seen, and B, this particular douchebag happens to be in a band called Eternity's End with one Christian Münzner, otherwise known as the guy from Epitaph who I just interviewed. The Zen of Speed Picking will gradually bring you closer to the concept of speed picking and all of the techniques involved within it, such as pick slanting and all of that shit, in a fun and digestible way. What you won't find in this course is nonsense like those spider walk runs that you've seen 1,000,000 times that you'll never actually apply to your songwriting in 1,000,000 years and that aren't fun to do. Instead, Justin has taken the approach of somebody who's spent his entire life playing and writing music to bring you closer to the concepts of pick slanting, string skipping, and all of that crap, and he's thereby created the perfect blueprint for the player who tends to get stuck writing shred guitar solos. The course has etudes sorted by speed, complexity, and stamina, daily workouts that you can do to improve your speed picking, a bunch of licks that you can incorporate into your own playing, way more things that would make this ad way too long, and best of all, it's available through the link in my description for €98 for a limited time only. Go play guitar. Okay, so you said the recording process was very long, which kind of ties into another rumor about Necrophagist, which is that the songs weren't really recorded as songs. They were recorded, and there's a lot of punch-ins and stuff, and not really.
Yeah, obviously, but I mean that's very normal with that kind of music. You know, if you read the stories of how Megadeth did Rust in Peace back in 1990, obviously didn't have digital recording, but they were piecing the record together. And I think it's a very, very normal process with that technical kind of music where you just don't play the song from start to finish and call it a day. I don't think
obviously. I mean, I couldn't play a Necrophagist riff start to finish. I mean, I've been trying for
even
years.
if you can play it so that it sounds good live, it's like you need just things. You need a certain accuracy on the record where you can hear really everything. And probably we did it a little bit more extreme than what was normal at the time. I mean, you know, this was in the time before Pro Tools and Cubase could do it like nowadays. Nowadays, it's really super simple with the grid to do every. You probably can. I mean, I think you can hear it when you do it. So I think you have to be very careful with how to do it. In Epitaph, I think you can't really hear it. But a lot of modern bands record like more extreme even than we did, and you can actually hear it, right? I think for me, it's a sound aesthetic thing. You have to be very careful with how you do this. But it's like back then it was very different. You know, there was no DI tracks. So it's not like nowadays when you have a DI track, you can actually see where your note is. Back then, we didn't record with DI tracks, and you really had to see in the actual waveform of the distorted guitar, you know, if you wanted to edit something. And that was a very, very, very difficult, very hard process, actually, you know.
Yeah.
And it took a long, long time, but I had some arguments with Muhammed at that time because I thought we were exaggerating it. And he said, well, you know, the idea is that the intention of the composer comes out 100%, and I can kind of understand it because imagine you compose a record and then something doesn't come out clearly because you don't take the time to do it properly to really make it sound the way it should sound, you know. And it's not like so there's no half speed recording or anything on it, so we actually played the stuff in shorter segments, the riffs obviously, right, but we did many takes very often until it really had the accuracy.
So the half speed thing is now debunked. Thank you. Okay, that's
we didn't do that. No, it's because it sounds different, you know. It sounds different. It doesn't give you the sound aesthetic of what it's supposed to sound like. I mean, I hear on recordings when modern bands do that, and it doesn't sound organic. It doesn't sound natural, right? I mean, we did short segments, obviously, of stuff. You know, we did lots of punch-ins, things like that, you know. But yeah, it wasn't like the technology wasn't the same as you have nowadays,
right?
You know.
Let's see. I've never really heard any reports about what kind of guy Muhammad was, because I mean he's a very reclusive guy, obviously. That's why no one has heard or seen of him in like 20 years. I mean I've seen like maybe 2 interviews on like online that were written. There was no video.
Mm.
People have spotted him occasionally at metal festivals in like the Czech Republic. That's a thing
Mm-hmm.
that I see on Reddit sometimes. Like, oh look, I found Muhammad, and then they take a selfie with him, and that's pretty much all you
Mm.
can see. So, what kind of guy is he? Was he like?
Well, I don't want to say anything wrong here or anything bad
No,
about a
of course
person
not.
that's not here. So I'm like, I'm probably not the best person to ask this because we didn't end on very, very good terms, and I only can say that I did not get along with him on a personal level. I mean, he was my favorite musician at the time. I looked up to him a lot. I idolized him, and personality wise, in the beginning we were kind of friends, but there were I couldn't get along with him, and
Yeah,
I wouldn't consider him a friend anymore. I didn't have a good time, when I was in the band.
yeah,
So I felt very, very uncomfortable around
yeah. I
him.
mean,
Very, very, very uncomfortable.
he seems,
Like it
by all
was
accounts, he seems like a difficult person to work with.
it was, yeah, that's what probably I would say. It not only to work with, but also like on many, many personal levels for me at least. I mean, maybe I was the idiot. I don't know, but at least I didn't get along with him. And in my entire life, there were probably two people I really couldn't get along with, and he was one of the two.
Yeah,
So I was kind of relieved when the whole thing ended. But he wasn't a phenomenal musician, phenomenal, very, very focused, very. I learned a lot from this. I mean, I have to be very honest. I wouldn't be the
yeah,
musician I am nowadays if it hadn't been for this recording session and the time I've spent in the band. I think I learned more than in any years of studying with any other teacher. So with the music, he was super, super 100% focused, right? Like there was no room for any kind of error, inaccuracies or anything. So he was very, very dedicated with that, very focused, had a very 100% clear vision. I mean, this is something you find very rare with musicians, right? And he would also the kind of player he was. I remember when we played live shows, sometimes I would only hear his guitar on the monitor because I didn't have a sound guy, and he played like a metronome. Like he was singing, but the guitar that you were hearing through the monitor, it sounded like an edited rhythm guitar. But that was just the way that he really played. That was just the way his picking was with the rhythm guitar. So he was very demanding, obviously, to
yeah.
to be in that band. Like of every musician, he demanded that you give your 150%, and with that, I don't really have a problem. I mean, this is really how you should run a band.
Of course, yeah,
The reason that I didn't get along was more on a personal level. I think we were probably also raised too differently, very different childhood, very different cultural background. And in the end, it was just something where the personalities don't work. And that happens in life. So for me, he was very difficult to work with. But also on the other hand, I know that he had many friends outside of the music. I don't know what it's now, but he was friends with them for many, many years. So probably the situation is often very different if you're in a band with somebody than if you're not in the band, right? Like it's
yeah,
like with Megadeth. People say who played in Megadeth, they say, oh, like Dave Mustaine is a super difficult guy, but people who never played in a band with him, they say, oh, he's a super nice guy when you meet him, and there's
yeah.
nothing
Obviously, it's
wrong
different.
about his personality. So I think that also tied into it back in the day. And he studied engineering, and he kind of approached music in a similar way, right? Like very, very technical, very, very accurate, very, very focused on all the little details about the rhythms and everything,
Yeah.
like almost like I would say Epitaph is almost like a doctor thesis, the way it was conceived.
So,
Yeah,
I have two more questions to close this
sure.
out. Uh,
Yeah.
the first one is that, well, it's been rumored for, even by Muhammad, for many, many years now, that there is a
Mm.
third album that's pretty much done with members that Lord knows who they are, but that there is a third album and it's
Yeah.
somewhere on a hard drive in Muhammad's house. God knows where
I
that is, and it's finished.
I don't know anything about that because if that happened, then it probably happened with the lineup that played after us.
Yeah.
Like after Hannes and me left, there was I think Roman Golan on drums and a guy from Finland on guitar called Sami Ratikainen or something like that. And if there is a third album, it probably happened around that time or was with completely different members. I really don't know. So probably people who were in the band at that later point in time would probably know that because I heard those rumors too. There was around 2009 or 2010. I heard they would be recording or something like that.
Yeah.
But I had been out of the band already for 4 years
Yeah.
at
So
that
if
point.
you
So I don't really know anything about that.
so if you had to
Yeah.
place a bet, would you say that there will ever be new Necrophagist music?
I would say it's a 95% no.
All right.
I would think so.
So to completely conclude this interview, do you think that I will find Muhammad?
No.
So I've found somewhere to park, at least temporarily, and BMW, BMW, and Erotic Land porno cinema for magazine store. I don't know what my goal is with this documentary exactly, besides trying to achieve Muhammed from Necrophagist to, like, reaching out to me. I don't expect to, like, physically find him anywhere here. That's nonsense. That's a pipe dream. This building is as big as the town I live in, pretty much. All I'd need to be doing, even if he were to leave the building after the end of his shift, all I'd need to, like, be doing is standing 5 meters to the left, around a corner, and I wouldn't find him. So that's nonsense. But I don't know. I'll figure something out. I guess I came here with very little plan. I've decided to just take the simple approach for the time being and go into one of the BMW buildings that it would seem logical for an engineer to be working at and just ask if there is a Muhammed Suiçmez employed there. The worst they could say is they can't tell me for privacy reasons. Probably what they are going to say as well, word for word. But I have to try. Of course, you know, I'm going to have to redo all the voices, but I promise I'll make it authentic. My intuition tells me that this is where we're headed. Just a guess, though. You know, I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. Hi. I'm filming a kind of documentary. I just wanted to ask you if you've ever seen this man before. Because by all accounts, he's supposed to be employed by BMW in Munich.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Alright, thanks. So if I tell you a name, can you give me any information, or is that...
Definitely not.
Alright. Yep, alright. Have a good day. Okay, so I've had little to no luck talking to security, which makes sense, because obviously they don't want to be recorded, they don't even want to answer my questions, and so I've sort of reached an impasse in this documentary. For instance, over there, I can't even get in or get to talk to anybody because it's fenced off, but there is a BMW museum right over there. That's open, it has employees in it, it's a museum, so it's meant to have visitors. Maybe we'll have some luck there. The museum was closed that day, and when it opened the next morning, the police told us to put the cameras away and screw off, so that was a failure. It turns out, on an expedition like this, you'll quite quickly find yourself grasping at straws, because, as it turns out, BMW basically runs the entire city of Munich, and they really don't like you recording their employees because buildings are riddled with police, and we were stopped by them twice on the first day alone. In light of all of this defeat, I found myself with really only one more option at my disposal: harassing employees who were on break. Unsurprisingly, they really were not the most responsive. Have you ever seen this guy before? No. Alright, cool, thanks. I'm filming a small documentary. Would you mind answering a quick question?
Not really. I have to get back to work.
No, it'll take 5 seconds, I promise. Have you ever seen this man anywhere?
No.
See?
Never.
I'm sorry, could I ask you a quick question? It'll only take a second.
Oh, you're filming?
Oh yeah, but you won't be visible.
Please go away.
Okay, sorry. We have had no success so far talking to anyone. Security says they're not allowed to be filmed. I'm inclined to believe them. There's cameras everywhere. I'm not really sure what to do next. I think this may be where the expedition ends. I've had no success with anybody. Neither today nor yesterday, not that you can tell it's a different day by my outfit. I'm pretty much at the end of my methods here. I've reached my wit's end. There's nobody who can help me, who can tell me anything. I'm sure somebody could have told me whether or not there is a Muhammed Suiçmez employed at BMW, but for privacy reasons, obviously, they cannot. If you or anyone you know has any sort of connection to Muhammed from Necrophagist, any other member is pretty much useless because I can talk to them myself and they have no idea what happened to him, if anything happened to him, if he works here, if he lives here, if he's alive or if he's dead. Nobody knows. If you know, please reach out. The search is not over until we let it die. Something tells me I might have to let it die sooner rather than later.